I used to work as a night dispatcher for a private ambulance service. It wasn't like being a 911 operator. Our calls were mostly hospital transfers, non-emergency medical pickups, or the occasional drunk who needed a ride to detox. Routine stuff. Boring, even. But one night, I got a call I'll never forget. It was just after 2 a.m. The station was dead quiet, except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional crackle of the radio. My partner, James, had stepped outside for a smoke, leaving me alone in the dispatch room. Then the phone rang. Metro Med Dispatch, what's your emergency? I answered automatically. Silence. I checked the caller ID, no number, just unknown caller. I was about to hang up when I heard breathing. Shallow, uneven, like someone was struggling to inhale. Hello? I tried again. Do you need medical assistance? Still, no response, just that labored breathing. I felt a chill creep up my arms. Sometimes we get prank calls from teenagers messing around, but this didn't feel like that. It felt wrong. Sir or ma'am, if you need help, I can send an ambulance. Can you tell me where you are? Then finally, a voice. Weak, barely a whisper. Help me. I sat up straighter. Okay, what's your location? The line crackled. More breathing. Then just one word. Basement. My skin prickled. Basement where? Are you in a house? A building? Can you tell me an address? The static got worse. Then something I'll never forget. A faint, rhythmic thumping in the background, like someone tapping a finger on a hard surface. Then the line went dead. I stared at the receiver, heart pounding. A prank, I told myself. Had to be. Just some creep trying to scare the night dispatcher. Still, I logged the call, marking it as unresolved. 15 minutes later, the phone rang again. Same unknown caller. This time, I didn't even get a chance to speak. A voice, raspy, urgent, hissed through the line. He's coming. Then, silence. I slammed the receiver down, breathing hard. James walked in a moment later, rubbing his arms against the cold. You okay, man? You look like you've seen a ghost. I told him about the call. He frowned. Did they give an address? No, I admitted. Then there's nothing we can do. He shrugged. Probably some nut messing with you. Maybe he was right. But then, just as we were about to change shifts at 4 a.m., the police scanner crackled to life. All units, report of a break-in and possible assault at 322 Layton Street. Neighbor reports hearing screams from the basement. I froze. Layton Street was just 5 blocks from our station. James and I exchanged glances. Without speaking, we both knew. We had to go. When we arrived, 2 officers were already there. The front door was wide open, hanging off its hinges. One of the cops turned to us, looking pale. You the ones who called it in? No, I said. But we got a call earlier from someone saying they were trapped in a basement. The officer exchanged a look with his partner. Yeah, we found him. I felt a rush of relief until I saw his expression. You might want to sit down for this, he said. The guy in the basement? He's been dead for at least 2 days. I felt my stomach drop. That's not possible. I talked to him. The cop shook his head. No, you didn't. Then he motioned us inside. Down in the basement, the air was thick with decay. And in the far corner, slumped against the wall, was a man in a torn hospital gown. His face was sunken, his skin gray, his lips slightly parted, like he had died mid-scream. And on the table beside him, a phone. Still off the hook. Still warm. James and I stood frozen, staring at the scene in front of us. Then, one of the officers pulled something from the dead man's pocket. A crumpled receipt. The timestamp? 2:01 a.m. Exactly when I got the first call. I quit 2 weeks later, and to this day I don't answer unknown numbers. I'm choosing to remain anonymous for my own protection, but I will never forget the night that shattered my sense of reality. It happened at the end of my shift at the Anderson Distribution Center in Chicago, a vast warehouse just off South Pulaski Road. The place was always eerily quiet at night, save for the hum of conveyor belts and the occasional distant laugh of a coworker. I had worked there for nearly 2 years, but that night changed everything. It started like any other shift. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I sorted inventory, my steel-toed boots echoing against the concrete floor. The warehouse was massive, with endless aisles stacked with towering metal shelves. At night, it felt even more expansive, like an abandoned city of forgotten goods. The security cameras watched from their high perches, but we all knew they were mostly for show. Management only checked the footage if something went missing. Around 2:30 a.m., I took my usual break near the loading dock. The cold air seeped in through the gaps in the old metal doors, offering a brief reprieve from the stale indoor air. As I stood there sipping my coffee, I heard a sharp, metallic clang from somewhere deep in the warehouse. It wasn't unusual to hear things shifting. The racks were old, and sometimes pallets weren't stacked properly. But this sound was different. It wasn't the dull thud of something tipping over. It was deliberate, like metal being struck with force. I glanced at the clock above the dock. Only a few of us were on duty, scattered across different sections. I radioed in. "Anyone near receiving hear that?" Silence. Then after a moment, a crackling reply. "Didn't hear anything. Where was it?" I hesitated. "Not sure. Sounded like Bay 14? Bay 14 was an area we rarely used, an old section of the warehouse filled with obsolete inventory waiting to be scrapped. I didn't want to go alone, but I also knew I wouldn't be able to shake the unease unless I checked it out. Gripping my flashlight, I made my way past the main aisles, the overhead lights giving way to dim emergency bulbs casting long, distorted shadows. As I neared Bay 14, the air felt heavier, almost oppressive. The silence was suffocating. My boots crunched over stray bits of plastic and dust. I swept the flashlight across the racks, illuminating rows of shrink-wrapped boxes. Nothing seemed out of place. I was about to turn back when I saw it, a single metal pipe lying in the center of the aisle. It hadn't been there before. I felt the first real pang of fear. Someone had to have dropped it. But why? And where were they? I turned quickly, scanning the darkness behind me. The rows stretched endlessly, empty and still. My breathing had become shallow. I told myself it was just another worker playing a prank, but the gnawing doubt in my gut wouldn't let up. Then I heard it. A breath. Not mine. Slow. Deliberate. Right behind me. I spun around, the flashlight shaking in my grip, but there was nothing there. Just the empty aisle. My pulse pounded in my ears. I took a step back, then another, my heart racing. That's when I saw it. Movement in the reflection of a metal shelving unit. A silhouette just at the edge of the aisle watching. I turned my flashlight towards it, but by the time the beam hit, there was nothing there. My breath came in shallow gasps. I backed away, moving faster now, nearly tripping over my own feet. My mind scrambled for logic, but none of it made sense. Then my radio crackled to life. A voice, barely above a whisper. "You shouldn't be here." I froze. The voice wasn't familiar. It wasn't any of my coworkers. It was low, strained, like someone forcing out words through clenched teeth. My hands shook as I raised the radio to my lips. "Who is this?" Silence. I didn't wait for a response. I turned and ran, my flashlight bouncing wildly as I bolted down the aisles, past racks of forgotten inventory, past the cold, empty loading bays. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I didn't stop until I burst into the break room, where two of my coworkers sat, oblivious, scrolling on their phones. They looked up at me, startled. "Dude, you okay?" one of them asked. I couldn't speak. My mind was still reeling. I stared at them, then at the radio in my hand. It crackled again, a burst of static, then nothing. We checked the security footage the next day. It showed me walking into Bay 14, pausing, looking around, but that was it. No shadows, no figure, no movement behind me. But I know what I saw. I never worked another night shift alone after that. I never wanted to tell this story. Even now, I hesitate. But something compels me to put it down, maybe as a warning, or maybe just to convince myself that it really happened. My name is Chen, and I've been a night shift delivery driver for UPS for the past 5 years. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills. The quiet of the night suits me. Fewer people, fewer distractions. Just me, my truck, and the road. That night, I clocked in at the Waldorf facility like always. I ran through the usual pre-shift checks, logging my route, scanning the parcels, loading the truck. Everything was routine, except for one package. It was small, about the size of a shoebox, wrapped in plain brown paper and sealed with layers of clear tape. No return address, just a single delivery label. Recipient. H. Graves, 1425 Blackwood Road, Calvert County. I didn't recognize the address, but that wasn't unusual. Plenty of remote homes and farmhouses in that part of Maryland. It was a long drive, though, about 40 miles down winding, desolate roads. I pushed the package to the back of my mind and started my shift. The first few deliveries were normal, but as I left the well-lit streets and entered the rural backroads of Calvert County, something felt off. Maybe it was the mist rolling over the asphalt, or the eerie silence that swallowed my truck's engine noise. The air itself felt different, thicker, heavier, like I was driving into something I shouldn't. I followed my GPS, but the further I went, the worse my signal got. The road narrowed, twisting through dense woods that loomed on either side. The trees were skeletal, their branches reaching out like bony fingers. A shape darted across the road, a deer, maybe, but I barely had time to react before my tires skidded over loose gravel. I clenched the wheel, my breath coming fast. Finally, I arrived. 1425 Blackwood Road wasn't a house. It was an abandoned gas station. The windows were shattered, the pumps rusted, the sign above the door barely readable. Graves Service was scrawled across the peeling paint. I checked the package label again. H. Graves. I hesitated. No lights, no signs of life. The whole place felt wrong. The air smelled of mildew, rust, and something else, something metallic, almost like blood. A single street lamp flickered weakly, casting long, distorted shadows across the cracked pavement. I carried the package to the door and knocked. Nothing. I knocked again, harder. The door creaked open on its own. My pulse spiked, but I had a job to do. I stepped inside. The air was thick with dust, each breath heavy in my lungs. The interior was a wreck. Shelves collapsed, an old cash register caked in grime, a few rusted oil cans scattered on the floor. Then I saw them. Photos covering the back wall. My breath caught in my throat. They were all of me. Snapshots of me loading packages, driving my truck, sitting in my cab, drinking coffee at my usual stop. Some from years ago, some from last week. My hands shook as I reached for the package, tearing off the paper. Inside was a single Polaroid. It was me, standing right there in the gas station holding the package. A noise outside, footsteps, slow, deliberate, gravel crunching under a heavy boot. I spun around, but the doorway was empty. My breath was ragged now, my fingers numb. The silence outside was oppressive, like the world was holding its breath. Then, movement. A shadow shifting just beyond the flickering light. I didn't stay to ask questions. I ran. I jumped into the truck, slammed the door, and threw it into reverse. Gravel sprayed as I sped away. My hands were slick on the wheel. My heart hammered against my ribs. As I turned back onto the main road, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The door to the gas station was open, but no one was there. The next morning, I tried looking up 1425 Blackwood Road, but no records existed. The place wasn't on any maps. When I asked some of the older drivers about it, one of them, a guy named Roy, stiffened. "You took a package there?" he asked. His face pale. "That place burned down 20 years ago. No one's been there since. I still drive that route. I still pass that turnoff sometimes. I never take it. I don't know who was watching me that night, but I know I'll never forget it. I'll update you all if anything happens again."